Hi, everyone. My name is Shashi Bellamkonda. I'm the host of the Talking Headless Show and very excited today. Thank you all for joining the show. Really excited today. This show is about the analyst relations community and the community of technology analysts. So it's divided into two segments. This is every day, every month in the last Wednesday of each month. I'll have my first guest will be from the analyst relations community, and the second guest is from the analysts one. As you join, feel free to ask questions and also comment on it so we can make this a very interactive one. Today, I have two very exciting guests. I'm really thrilled to have Alyssa Stone, who's head of analyst relations at Wiz. She's been a communications leader. So much of experience with analyst relations, working for large, high growth companies, large global organizations, and being both like a one person AR team to a large AR team. So, with that, I'm going to bring in Alyssa Stone to the stage. Hey, Alyssa, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great, Shashi. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. No, I think this is really interesting conversation. We have an audience that of analyst relations and analysts, right? I think this is all about Alyssa, the person, OG in analyst relations, in my opinion. So, just to start off the conversation, just want to know where are you joining us from, and what brought you into a career in analyst relations?
Absolutely. So I am joining you live today from just south of Boston, Massachusetts. I actually started my analyst relations career when I was in college, which is super rare. And it's been a really, really fun journey. I've learned a lot, and I'm glad to share a little bit more about kind of my learnings and some of my challenges along the way.
Very nice. So you joined right from college. How was analyst relations then, and how is it now? What trends are you seeing along the way? Share with us your experience.
Absolutely. It's changed a lot. So I got my first taste of analyst relations between my junior and senior year of college at Santa Clara University in the Silicon Valley. And I was an intern at a PR agency, and I was mostly doing PR, which was fine. But then they asked me one day to host an analyst call, and I absolutely loved it because it combined for me like two areas of interest, which are making connections between people and finding commonalities, and then being curious and learning about technology and trends. So that's how I started. And then I had kind of an interesting decision to make because my senior year, the last semester, most of my friends were at Santa Clara. It was beautiful out. They were going to the beach and the pool, and like maybe finding time in between to like go to maybe one class as they were finishing. And I had this great opportunity to do a full-time internship, which then turned into a job before I graduated, doing analyst relations at a company called Ariba, which was procurement, kind of B2B. And what was super interesting, Shashi, about starting my career then is that it was really like a downturn in the market. So I feel like I got a chance to have a lot of responsibility, and they kind of took a risk on me when I was really young because they weren't doing a lot of hiring at the time. And I think those market downturns can be such a great opportunity for new graduates. And I really grew my AR career from there. Most of the time I was at Ariba, I was a sole practitioner, and then I got recruited to go over to SAP, which was a totally different experience, but one that I loved and I grew a lot from, because I was part of a really great, wonderful AR team. And I loved how we covered different areas, but we could collaborate and learn from each other. And everybody had like a really unique style of AR. Some were really analytical, some were very relationship focused, some really loved to dig into the research, some liked market strategy. And I was lucky enough at SAP to lead a very talented analyst relations team. And so mentoring and kind of helping people find their own unique style of AR was great. And then I went over to Okta, which was really different than SAP. I was brought in to do kind of an analyst relations turnaround. And I had a smaller team. And what was really different there, and we can talk about career advice in just a minute, was that I was kind of the end all be all of AR. When I was at SAP, I always had a manager who also did AR. So something could get escalated up to them if an executive wasn't happy, or if you just have a problem you want to solve. And it was a transition going to Okta because I was the ultimate problem solver, and things got escalated up to me. But that was a really great experience, and had a wonderful team that I worked with there. And then about 15 months ago, it's almost like a baby, I joined Wiz, where I am now, where I'm back to being an AR team of one. And I love it because I'm really getting my hands dirty. If somebody's on a call with an analyst, I'm on it. I got to really build an AR program from the ground up and set the strategy. There's something really fulfilling about doing that. But of course, there's also, challenges, and you need to find really unique ways to scale when you're an AR team of one. So that's just a little bit about my journey so far.
Very nice. No, very interesting between actually starting an AR program plus working for large companies. That's quite a. So what kind of trends have you seen along the way? What has changed in the past couple of decades as you've been doing analyst relations?
Sure, absolutely. So there's two big trends that I've noticed, Shashi, and one is one that you've talked about on your show quite a bit, which has been AI in AR. And I admit, especially as somebody who has been doing analyst relations for a long time, I was really hesitant to embrace AI. I almost thought of it as something that went against kind of my code of analyst relations, which is that building relationships between people is so important. But I learned a lot from some of the early pioneers in AI, in thinking about Sonia, who was on your program, or Tretzia. And I learned about a lot of the benefits of scaling AR through AI, and then also not losing that really good personal connection. So that's something that I've now embraced, very carefully, especially with using AI to help do a first draft of an RFI. And one thing I found, Shashi, is that it doesn't take away from the quality of the work. Because for me, if I can use AI to look through the previous work that we've submitted and maybe some of our, product documents, then I can get an RFI, 3/4 of the way done, things I would have been copying and pasting and searching in different documents for. And then I can go to my product and product marketing teams and say, okay, all of the bandwidth that you have, I want you to dedicate to these vision questions. Let's think about really big and bold ideas, where are we going? And it's such a better investment in time. And I feel like the end survey that we submit is so much more insightful and probably even more accurate because we're pulling from all the latest product documentation. So that's one trend that I've noticed. And then the second one that I've noticed has really been kind of the evolution of what an analyst is and who is influencing. And I think that's very much company by company. They have a different philosophy on that. But when I first started in my AR career, I feel like it was really just about working with the big firms. It was all about Gartner, Forrester, IDC, and there were some smaller firms out there, but you spent pretty much all of your time with big firms. And what I've found now, especially with social media and with so many analysts, going out on their own or to different types of firms, is that yes, Gartner, Forrester, IDC are still very, very impactful, in deals, and their research is really credible and really well respected. But there are also so many independent influencers out there who are impacting end users and impacting deals and impacting the conversation in the market. So that's something that I've noticed, is that one of the most important roles that an analyst relations professional plays is knowing who is influencing and very much being open to different types of influencers and making sure that your analyst relations strategy embraces that. And that you're constantly listening because a new influencer can come in, a new space can be created. And that's something that I think is a lot different than what analyst relations roles were, even 10, 15 years ago.
That's a great point. I think who influences the buying decision seems to be a very big topic that's being discussed. So I have two questions for you in terms of advice to people who are seeking a career in analyst relations or who want to move or already have moved into analyst relations from other parts of the organization. One is, how do you corral all the people or resources that you need within the company to achieve your objectives is one. And thank you for answering the question about how you're using AI. And what are some things that you've seen about relationship building with technology analysts too? It's sorry about a very complicated, long question, but I'm
No,
sure we'll appreciate it.
They're great questions. I think when it comes to corralling people together, what I've found is you need to drive unique benefits to the people who are working with you in analyst relations. So I'll give an example. This is my first analyst relations job where I'm within the product marketing organization. And so when an analyst evaluation, when a new announcement comes out and we're talking with analysts about it, it's not me as analyst relations asking for my product marketing colleagues, product management colleagues, for a favor, like, hey, this is my project. I'd like some of your help with it. This is our project, and here's some of the objectives, and here is why it's important for the company. And then I always try to drive benefits back to those colleagues who I'm, getting answers from, or who are, spokespeople as well, like giving them summaries and insights back from the analysts. And I think it can actually help them build their careers by saying like, oh, I was on this analyst call with Gartner, and we got these really interesting insights about this category that we should be thinking about. So I'll also make sure that, during those calls, they're really, really busy in just trying to answer questions and really being on point. But I always try to deliver back to them, like, here's some really great insights that I took from this discussion, and here's what I think we may want to do about it. Like, we might want to bring up this topic on our next roadmap call. Like, is this something that, based on this analyst's advice, we might want to prioritize earlier? And so I encourage them to really get value from the interaction as well. I set up a lot of inquiries rather than, I don't do as many briefings as inquiries, because I want to make sure that the colleagues I'm working with also ask the questions that are top of mind for them, even questions they're just intellectually curious about. So I always try to think of this as, yes, you're corralling people to try to get all of this work done. But first of all, the more work that I can do, either just on my own or with AI, so I'm asking them only the questions that they uniquely know, that helps. And then also driving those benefits back to them. That's also really important. Remind me of your second question.
No, the second, I think you answered both of the questions. One was about, corralling everybody together. And the second question, I think you probably answered, but it's more if you want to give some details, is what do they consider as success within any organizations for AR? Like, what are some things like people say, wow, this is really great. Almost like, how do you do your internal PR?
Absolutely. So that's an interesting question, and that's shifted a lot throughout my career. So earlier in my career, it was all about analyst evaluations and how we did them, or mentions, analyst reports, about our company. And that's still very important. I think any analyst relations professional who doesn't think that evaluations are important is probably kidding themselves, unless they're in an area where they don't do competitive evaluations. Like, those are very, very important. But I also think those insights back to the company, helping you refine your messaging before a launch, helping you reprioritize roadmap items. That's also really important. So for me, the way that and again, communication has evolved. So we use Slack really heavily as a company. So I have an analyst relations Slack channel where I'll share, here's what's coming up, here's some interesting insights that we learned, so that it's not just those on the call, but also those who care about analyst relations, who might be a spokesperson for a different area, learn a little bit about what we're getting back from the analysts and advice that they've given us. And sometimes that channel actually starts really interesting dialogues between teams, because someone might cover just one area of the business, someone covers a different area of the business, and an analyst might give us advice that crosses both areas. So sometimes the analyst advice can spur some really meaningful dialogues across the business, which is also something that I didn't focus on earlier in my career, but now I found to be one of the biggest impacts of analyst relations. So, of course, the really visible things are important. You can't take your eye off the ball of those valuations, but a lot of the value also happens behind the scenes.
That's really cool. And I think just before we got on the show live, we were also discussing how the analyst relations community and analyst community are very friendly, very approachable, and they talk to each other. What has been your experience?
Yes, I'm probably biased, but I think the analyst relations community is the best one in tech. I have always embraced, but even more so now, that getting to know analyst relations professionals across different spaces, even amongst your competitors, is really important. We're not going to be discussing our technology. We're obviously not going to discuss roadmap, but we'll be talking about how methodologies are evolving. We'll be talking we'll be talking about analyst relations tactics. We talk a lot about AI and AR. What do you do? What do you not do? We do a lot of recommendations for, hey, do you know somebody good who covers this area? I'm hiring. And every once in a while, we'll be at an analyst relations reception and take a selfie and send it to an analyst. And they're like, wait a minute, you know each other? So I think it's a lot like the analyst community, Shashi, where we as a vendor will have an event for analysts, and we'll have analysts from all sorts of different firms. And at first you'll think it's uncomfortable, but then they come in, they hug each other, ask about their family. So I think the more that we as analysts and analyst relations professionals can get to know each other, think about advancing our industry, and talk about how it's evolving, the better.
That's true. You also mentioned how AI can actually help get information together very quickly, especially if you use something internally. Looking into the future, the human touch will always be necessary, because I think human beings have the ability to change their minds much more quickly than an AI model can. So what are your comments on how this relationship is going to be long term?
That's a good question, and it's a tough one. I do think there will always be a role in that human element. I think an important part of analyst relations is just your gut instinct. Is this person impacting the market? Do they get it? In watching, I love that now everything is on video. It wasn't before. You can see on a Zoom call if an analyst is literally leaning back, if they are engaged, their facial expressions, and you can just get from the tone of their voice, whether is something resonating with them, is it not? And I think you as the analyst relations professional also, that analyst, you're on calls with them on lots of different topics. So I think I, as that glue in between the analyst and our spokesperson, can know okay, this analyst is usually much more engaged. I don't think this is resonating with them, or you might want to take a slightly different angle, or this analyst isn't normally one to speak up a lot. They time to think and reflect, and they might want to give us feedback on a separate call. So yes, you could do facial analysis. I'm sure someone's going to come up with that, where then you can get not only a transcript of what the call was, but also the reaction and the facial responses and even tone of voice. But I can't see AI replacing then just that gut instinct of an analyst relations professional. Like, is this going well? AI can't help steer a discussion if it's maybe going the wrong way. So I think it'll continue to automate important parts of analyst relations. Absolutely. I think there's also going to be some really interesting ethical questions that come up, especially if you think about the EU when it comes to recording people. Did they consent to that? Did they not consent to that? And getting transcriptions and analyzing those and making decisions based on those. I think that's one of the biggest hot buttons in the analyst relations community now is, well, analysts often record us. Can we record them? Can we not? I'm pretty old school. I take old-fashioned notes. But I know for others, they feel like it is much more effective to record a call. You get a translation of that. So I think some of those ethical considerations will also come up when it comes to recording and transcripting and analyzing things. So a lot of interesting topics up for debate, but I certainly think AI is here to stay, but also that human element is also here to stay.
That's true. I mean, great question. I think you gave me a lot to think about in the answer. I also wanted to ask you about sometimes people feel what size of a company should have AR relations. And there's a lot of debate about, I personally, for example, just to share an experience, I actually answer calls from startups. Usually one tip that I can give people is always, even if a bot answers your call, always answer, because the bot is intelligent enough to say, this person is not a spammer. So I turn around and I say I'm an analyst, and some of them won't even know who to direct you to, right? So my question to you, Alyssa, is having worked in large companies and small companies, what is your advice to founders or leaders in companies? When should they start their analyst relations program? What are your thoughts?
So my first instinct is, if analysts are writing about your space and writing about your company, someone at the company needs to have analyst relations in their job responsibility. So I know that at Wiz, I was the first analyst relations hire, but it doesn't mean that Wiz wasn't working with analysts before I joined. So other members of the communications team or marketing team, often product marketing, might have analyst relations as part of their job responsibility. I would encourage companies to have one person to do that, because it really does help to streamline things. That person may have other responsibilities too, but I would encourage them to have one person who is dedicated to AR, even if that's a quarter or a half of their job. I would also encourage them to start looking for someone to do AR before you need it. Because if you wait until you need it, it's going to be too late. Because so much of analyst relations is talking with analysts early on, getting their perspectives before they start writing a report, and getting their advice before your message is finalized. And so if you wait until you're ready, and until, okay, they're starting to write about our space a lot and they're starting to write about our company, maybe we should think about getting the case for an analyst relations hire, it's going to be too late. So I would say start early, make sure you have somebody who is responsible for AR, get access to a couple of firms that are actively writing about the space, because you can start learning from there. And then I think when you have an analyst evaluation, or an analyst who is very actively writing research or posting about you and about your company, it's probably time for someone full-time in analyst relations to work with that analyst, and then also make sure that they're out there looking for who is impacting buying decisions. Because if you're seeing one person, there's probably many, probably many more. And I think one person can do a lot in analyst relations, even across multiple markets. But in order to really scale, that's when I think you need to start building out a team, is when you're in several different markets, and then you just need more bandwidth and more scale than even that AI can provide.
That's really great. I mean, almost I could write a playbook on analyst relations just by the conversation. So thank you so much for providing all these insights. As we wait for our next guest, Shelly, I think we have Rajiv Sharma, who thanks Rajiv. Hello from both of us. He's saying that it's a very pertinent conversation and discussion.
Oh, thank you,
Rajiv. Yes. What about advice to people who, I mean, I think the career space is been so disrupted, right? Like I have a college going kid. I don't think I was able to advise them in saying like what career to choose. And they're all so independent that they probably don't need our advice anyway. But it's difficult to say like, where you'll end up. So in a situation like this, with technology changing, with the way we do business changing, what's your advice to people who are seeking a career in analyst relations?
My advice is to be open and to be really positive, and to take a risk. I think often when a new graduate looks at job requirements, they might say, well, I don't quite have experience in this area, or I need about 3/4 of these requirements, and they think, they're probably not going to want a candidate like me. But what if they do? And I think throwing your hat in the ring, networking is really important within analyst relations. I mentor a lot of analyst relations professionals who are early in their career. I always love taking calls and chatting with people. The AR community is really open. Just reach out, engage online, go to sessions like this, ask for help. So don't hesitate to take that little bit of a risk to reach out to someone, even if it feels like something that feels a little bit uncomfortable. Just get curious about that, because that's where I feel you find opportunities that really challenge you and that are going to end up growing your career.
That's great. Hey, Alyssa, we'll take a quick break with a segment that I'm calling Marketing While Brown. This is just things that I find online. And very soon we'll also have Shelly coming in, who's going to join us soon. So I'm going to send you to the green room, and then we can come back for a moment.
Sounds great.
Hi, everyone. This segment, I usually try to bring in things that I have observed that may be useful for either the AR or the marketing community as a whole. Again, this is not an opinion of my employer or what I do in my usual day-to-day life. But I was just mentioning to Alyssa how, I mean, when salespeople actually get a bot that is answering the call, they should not disconnect, because that's a surefire way of your number getting into a spammer list. So I had this call from this interesting company called Neurons. And the interesting thing about it that I've not seen before, and that's why this is part of my segment this week, is they've been doing this for over 12 years. And they started off with neural science, not necessarily AI first, but brain scans. How does the brain react to different messaging, colors, images? And so I thought this was an interesting company to check out. They have the head of the company is actually a neural scientist themselves. Feel free to send me more of your suggestions on what we can feature here. I mean, a few of the things that I had featured before were a company called Tracker and other things. So that's great. Let's bring Alyssa back. Hi, Alyssa. I'm just going to make sure Shelly is comfortable joining. I know she did make a comment, so I know she's getting ready. She's waving hello from the audience. That's true.
Hi,
So,
Shelly.
hi, Shelly. Feel free to join us. Your segment is next. So, Alyssa, been a very interesting conversation. What do you do outside of work that really excites you?
I am doing something that is really trying my patience, which is I'm learning how to golf. And
Wow.
it's so hard being new at something and really not being good at it and having to be incredibly patient. But on Wednesday nights, I have golf lessons. So that's something I'm learning to do. Also, traveling a lot, trying to be a cool mom and going to concerts with my daughter, who's 13. So we have another one tomorrow night. So lots of interesting stuff outside of work that I try my best to make time for.
That's really fantastic and exciting. And, having your family with you to learn. I did do it once, but after that, I have not been. So kudos to you on that. That's really great. Hey, Shelly, looking forward to your segment next. What questions would you ask Shelly, Alyssa? And maybe you can also say, like, how do you find analysts as you move into new verticals, right? Like Okta, you were there with Ariba Network. So how are you been looking and connecting with analysts?
That is, I think that's one of the most important jobs of somebody in analyst relations is defining that ecosystem and who you invest your time in. I think there's a lot of different ways talking to executives at the company, like who do they follow, looking at media coverage, and then just doing your own in-depth analysis of not only the space that you're in, but the spaces that you're moving into or that your company is curious about, who's writing, who is advising companies about it. We do ask customers as well, and that's always really interesting to see, like, oh, who do you follow, or are you consulting with any analyst firm? So all sorts of different ways. And I think it'll also be really interesting to hear from Shelly about the evolving role of being an analyst. How has that changed throughout her career? And since this is for AR professionals and also analysts, maybe pet peeves or things that she likes about analyst relations professionals, that would be very insightful to hear directly from an analyst.
Yeah, and shout out to Andy Deere and to Brent Leary for your comments. And of course, Shelly, thank you so much for your comments as you joined the conversation with Alyssa. So Andy Deere says, once you make that connection with a solid person through your golf club and get a good hit, it'll feel wonderful.
Yes,
Really
no,
good.
absolutely. Andy, I had one of those last week, and you're right. I'm trying to get more of those. So it doesn't happen very often. I'm not consistent, but it is the best feeling. So I hope to have another one of those tonight in my golf lesson.
Yes, and hello to Angela Stewart. I really admire her. She's head of revenue operations and solutions at NASDAQ. She's probably traveling, but took the time to join us. That's really great. Alyssa, thank you very much for the wonderful insights. Like I said, it was almost like a analyst relations playbook throughout this entire conversation. Hope to welcome you back sometime. I'm going to move you to the green room while we bring up Shelly, and feel free to stay and reply to some of the comments or answer questions that are there.
Glad to,
Thank
and
you
thanks
very
again for
much.
having me, Shashi.
All right, our next guest. I'm really excited because I've known her for a very long time. I mean, wherever communications or influence change, I think Shelly has been in the forefront. Currently, she's a tech analyst, advisor, content creator, speaker, brand storyteller, strategist, a lot. I mean, I do come across Shelly at a lot of analyst events. And before that, if I remember long back, organizations like Blog Her or Blog World. So she's been there for a very long time and a very good friend of mine. So I'm going to bring her up right now. Oh, sorry. I have to get more used to this. Yes. Shelly, how wonderful to see you.
You
Yes.
know, Shashi, I feel like I was listening to your intro. I feel like we came up together, in those trenches, those early days of social media and, sort of how exciting it was to be diving in and working with. In those early days, I was working as a brand strategist and helping my clients navigate those early days of digital transformation when we hadn't even coined that term yet. And you were right there, in those trenches with me and doing all kinds of interesting things. So I do feel very much like we kind of have come up together.
That's true, but I think from my recollection of everything that was there, I think the community of people who were in the space of content creation at that time also really helped each other, and I've learned a lot from you, and I continue to do that. And of course, we're probably connected on all forms of social media. So say hello to our audience. I'm probably streaming this to about 10 to 11 outlets, and really happy. And this is a new gig for me, like hosting this after Paul said, like, hey, let me hand this over to someone. So Paul and Brent said, why not let Shashi do it? So I'm really excited about this, Shelly. And our audience basically will be a lot of AR professionals and a lot of technology analysts. And this is my third time hosting this show. What's your journey to becoming a tech analyst? I mean, there are so many career pathways open to you, and you're also an entrepreneur using the platform that you have created. So, talk to us about your journey.
Well, I started my career in the agency business, in the advertising agency business, and I had the opportunity to learn strategy kind of at the elbow of a brilliant strategist, one of my many mentors along the way. And I ended up starting my first company kind of by accident when I was 34, and I left the agency world, but I launched a marketing consulting business and built and grew and scaled that over the years. And then, I found myself really focusing on in, the 2000s, the middle 2000s, thinking about really how the web was changing the way we do business and how content was changing and becoming such an important part of what it is we do to build and grow our businesses and our reputations and our brands and the advent of social media and how important and again, you and I have walked this journey together, and I know that you've had some of the same conversations with peers and with clients that I have, but it was a time, it's similar to I think the conversations that we're having today about AI, in that this is a transformational moment. And moving our businesses from analog business models to digital business models and embracing things like cloud technology and all of that sort of thing, like this is the path forward. And so educating and having those conversations, and that's really when our paths crossed a lot, I think, in those early days, is because attending some of those conferences and events, and a lot of the work that I did in the early days was talking with the mom blogger community about how to think like a business person, and also educating them about what I, as an agency owner and someone who's responsible for helping clients build and grow and scale their brands, if I'm looking to work with an influencer, what do I expect from that influencer, and how can you what kind of reporting do I want from you, and all of that sort of thing. And so that was kind of a lot of the work that I did in the early days. And I worked alongside many enterprise B2B clients, helping them navigate their early digital transformation journeys. And some of that work was, things like, helping them launch corporate blogs and helping them understand, we came from a time where, businesses thought about keeping gates around all of their thinking and the thought of putting a blog out there that shared what our philosophy is on this or how we do this or whatever was just, oh my gosh, I could never do that. Somebody will steal our secrets. And people were very, very afraid of social media. And, I had clients in the early days whose method of dealing with their anxiety about social was to preclude access to Facebook. For instance, within the enterprise, and there's nothing that tells your employees you trust them anymore than precluding them from using social media. So it was really a lot about educating, and I think that for me, it was probably in early 2016. My then business partner and I had both had deep digital transformation expertise, and we were for the couple of years before then, we were working with brands like Microsoft and Cisco, and this was in many days. This was before technology brands had their own corporate blogs, and they weren't really active in social media. They were still very frightened of it. So it was very common for them to find industry experts, thought leaders, people who had established credibility on topics like mobile and cloud and things like that. And so these clients were coming to us asking us to write about certain topics. A lot of those were focused on cloud because that was, the latest, greatest big thing. And they didn't want us to write content for them. They wanted us to write about what they were doing and to publish that content on our own website and on our own social channels. And they wanted to be able to leverage our credibility and our networks, which was, early days of influencer marketing and things like that. And so we started talking about the work that we were doing and the value that we thought we brought to the clients that we were working with. And we felt like there was room in the market for, of course, there's the Gartners and the Forresters and the IDCs, the heavy hitters, but we felt like there was room in the market for a small analyst firm who, a boutique style firm, but people that was led by people who had true practitioner level expertise in digital transformation. And we didn't see that out of, please don't get mad at me, any analysts who are listening, but we didn't see that in the early days from the likes of Gartner and IDC and Forrester, and things were very, big ships turn slowly. And we were a small ship. And so we started working with clients, and we started, we could provide research capabilities, and we were very technologically knowledgeable and savvy. And, I was able to bring into that equation a 20-year career as a marketing brand strategist and a storyteller. And a lot of what we do, across marketing and comms and PR and analyst relations is really about telling stories, and being good at that, I think, sets the stage for success.
Perfect. No, I think a lot of good advice there that I'm also mentally making a note and I listen to this again. So I think you probably answered the question already. I'd like to know, now you're a sought after, analyst. I follow a lot of the content that you create. What makes you successful with both, being able to create the content, and what advice do you have for others to become an analyst that is sought after?
I think that Alyssa made some really, really good points. And I think probably one of the most important thing is to know is that not all analysts are the same, nor do you want them to be. And, I work with many brilliant analysts throughout the community, and there are analysts who have been product managers, and analysts who are engineers, and analysts who have deep, deep expertise in how things work and how you build these, and how the Lego blocks go together and all of that sort of thing. And there are analysts who are strategists, who are great communicators, who are great at helping develop go-to-market messaging, and actually who might be better at developing go-to-market messaging or evaluating go-to-market messaging than an engineer might be. And so I think, to me, there's room in this room for people with different skill sets and different levels of expertise. And I think you want that in your room when you're putting together an analyst program, or when you're thinking about, can I be an analyst and what skills do I bring to this? And, we're seeing, Shashi, we're seeing a transformation, I think, of analyst relations, where PR is involved in analyst relations, and marketing is involved, and influencer relations are involved. And some of this is just one big pot. And, I was having a conversation with a fellow incredibly well-known analyst a couple of weeks ago. And, we were talking about a client that we share, and he was telling me that 75% of his six-figure budget with this client came from PR. So, so this is, analysts do span kind of a bigger area within organizations today than they might have even 5 years ago. So I think that, but to me, understanding that you want different voices and different skill sets and different perspectives. And, I was thinking about this conversation yesterday, and I remembered an example of, to me, this is why diverse skill sets and diversity in general is important as part of your analyst relations program. About 5 years ago, we did a massive research study for one of our clients, and it was so cool. The respondent base was 4,000 respondents, which, as you know, is a big study, right? Yeah. And there were 2,000 consumers and 2,000 participants from sort of the brand side, and the study was about customer experience, and for a very, very large company. And I had I led the analyst team at this company. And so one of my analysts had led the research study, and then we were going through the results, and we were writing the report together. And it's funny because he's a man, I'm a woman. We're about the same age. We both had spouses and children and everything else. And this was about buyer behavior and buyer expectations. And one of the aha moments that I had when I was reading some of his initial insights is how differently we interpreted those results from the study, and how our own life experiences and our own biases as researchers and analysts impacts our finished product. And I don't think we think about that often enough. And Shashi, as you know, like, the analyst community is comprised probably predominantly of men. And so if you have an analyst program and you're not looking at it in terms of diversity and the different voices and experiences that are part of advising you and guiding you, I think you're perhaps going down a wrong path. But for me, that, and by the way, my colleague wasn't wrong in the insights that he put together as part of this research report. But what our finished product was, when we were able to combine my insights, because, by the way, I also happen to be the chief consumer in my family. And I think it's very safe to say that in many instances, women serve that role, right? And so how I evaluated what some of our survey respondents were sharing and what some of our brand respondents were sharing was different in many ways than my male peer who did not walk the same path that I walked. And so So it's always a reminder to me that there are different perspectives to everything, and you need to question those things. And again, the diversity of thinking and the diversity of voices as part of an analyst program, I think, is incredibly important. And so for somebody aspiring to be an analyst, keep that in your pocket and have that be a part of your conversation when you're interviewing for a job, and what you bring to the table that perhaps is different than what the rest of the team might look like.
That's a great insight, Shelly. And as I think about it, that makes perfect sense. And also, the buyer is also diverse nowadays.
Yeah.
So I think a diverse of opinion is really good. Thank you so much for sharing that. And by the way, Angela has a shout out for you, like speaking to the mom blogger community. Yeah, Angela, I'm actually coming to Atlanta, but you should follow Angela's Substack. She talks a lot about AI and very helpful tips in that as well.
Great.
This is going to be totally off script. I wasn't thinking of this, and Alyssa, forgive me, but maybe I should introduce you both to each other on the air. How
Of
about
course.
that? Right?
Hi, Alyssa.
There you are.
Hi.
I really so enjoyed your conversation. So many great insights.
Thank you so much. And you shared such great insights, and it's really true about each analyst having different areas of expertise and just interest. And that's why I think it's so important for companies to think about building out a program that looks at the different types of analysts and where they're influencing, but then also like where their strengths are.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot from your talk as well.
Yeah, I think it's just, and I say this sometimes, every now and then I encounter, run across analysts can be our own worst enemies, right? Sometimes, but it's like, and I think that if you happen to be an analyst with deep technical expertise, I think it's really important to respect what other people bring to the table in terms of their skill sets and their capabilities. And you know what? Some of my dearest friends are brilliant engineers, and they're terrible communicators. They're not great writers. They're not, and by the way, that's a sweeping generalization, and I certainly don't mean that about everyone, but I'm saying we all bring different strengths, and it is the power of that community and that difference in thinking and all of those puzzle pieces that help, I think, a brand really get the biggest benefit out of their analyst relations program.
Absolutely. And I think that storytelling ability too,
Yeah.
that a lot of analysts bring, and you certainly have, like, that's where the magic happens, because people are more likely to listen to whether it's a story about brand or a story that's a lot, very deeply technical. I think inherently we as humans are more likely to absorb and retain and listen to a great story than just like PowerPoints, being recited off. I'm sure you've been in those briefings before where it's like 29 minutes into a 30-minute briefing and you've been staring at PowerPoints and you haven't really heard anything that's a compelling story and a reason to retain that information.
Well, and what's different? Like, okay, this is my 7th briefing of the day or whatever, what's different about this? And, those slides that are packed with so much information and all of that, it's very interesting. I think the other thing that I would encourage, and I'm very interested in your perspective on this, Alyssa, again, I have the deepest respect for my colleagues at Gartner and Forrester and IDC, the big players. But the reality of it is that independent analysts, and, admit to bias here, been an independent analyst my whole career, but, independent analysts are a valuable part of this equation and bring deep expertise. And I think one of the things that has been so nice to see, certainly over the course of the last maybe 3 years or so, is that I've really been seeing major brands make an effort to make room in their programs for independent analysts. And it is not uncommon for certainly some of the bigger brands to have somebody managing AR that just manages the independents. And, I have a group of absolutely brilliant colleagues, Zias Caravella and Carolina Milanese and Maribel Lopez and Bob O'Donnell. And, people who have amazing expertise and who work as independent analysts. And so I think my plea to the brands and to the AR managers who are listening to this conversation is that absolutely you should work with the bigs. But if you overlook working with the independent analysts, you are leaving so much expertise on the table, and you're really giving yourself the short shrift.
I could not agree more. I love Maribel, and we keep trying to find a time that we're either both going to be in Boston together or in San Francisco. Yeah. But absolutely, there's always going to be an impactful result from working with the big firms. But I also think you get really different benefits and conversations when you work with independent analysts. The way that I've embraced it, because I'm the one kind of analyst influencer relations hire at Wiz, is that I think about, okay, if I have an announcement coming out, I'm going to be doing pre-briefings, or we're going to be getting advice, or we have a webcast or a paper, is to really think about who is the best person for this project. Who do we get great advice from? Who kind of keep us on our toes a little bit? And then who also has the ear of the buyers? And that's where I've really seen a big shift lately, is that, I think independent analysts have always had a strong voice and always been very, very important, alongside the larger firms. But what I've noticed in just looking at LinkedIn posts from some of the independents who I really respect, it's buyers who are replying in there and who are asking them questions and who are really curious and who are, going to their sessions. So I believe in embracing all different kinds of analysts, and just look at that analyst as a human, not just their firm name, and what's their area of expertise, and where can they as a person help your company and give you give you advice, not just thinking about them as being part of their firm. And I think most companies are embracing that. There are still some that aren't at all, and that are really just about, only working with larger firms. And I think they're missing out.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I'm so glad that I did this impromptu. So I'm glad you both have met each other now, and really fantastic. And in fact, thank you for mentioning Mirabel Lopez. She's on my list to invite for one of the future shows. So that's good. This has been very insightful. Thank you so much, Shelly and Alyssa, for your insights to the analysts and analyst relations community. I appreciate the time you put in and the insights that you gave us. So thank you very much.
Happy to be here.
So as we finish, just remember to thank you everyone for joining the show. The last Wednesday of every month, and we'll solicit your feedback on how the show is, what are the topics that you'd like to hear about, maybe suggestions for speakers to join the show. Also, if you're a software startup or a vendor that has an unusual product, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and use it for my segment during the show. What an absolute, almost a playbook from both Shelly and Alyssa. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. With that, thank you everyone for joining the show. Please check out our other shows on the Playaz Production Network, especially one I want to call out is the CRM Playaz by, this is by Brent, right? So with that, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
This has been a Playaz Productions Network digital broadcast.